Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you all for joining our training today. We will be discussing inputting damages and facility description, and this is presented by the PA training section.
This is a recording of a live webinar.
So our objectives today include inputting information from the site inspection report into Grants Manager to create that damage description and dimensions, also known as the DDD. Understanding the different sections of the DDD and what is being asked to be inputted in the drop-down or text boxes, and utilizing the DDD preview tab as well as best practices. Opening a work order. So to locate your work order, you're going to click on the bell feature in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It will bring you to your incomplete tasks, and then you will click the review button to fully open that work order. Once you have fully opened the work order, you will see this screen. At the very top, it states Site Inspection Work Order, and it provides you your general information, such as disaster number, the applicant name, and the work order number. From here, you want to scroll down to your damages to be inspected. You'll click on the caret and open that drop-down menu for damages to be inspected. This work order number 39665, has 14 damages attached to it. So once I clicked on that caret next to damages to be inspected, I then have a list of my several damages, and I am looking for damage number 995946 or damage E2, which is room and contents. So once you have located the damage that matches your completed site inspection report, you'll click Options over here on the left-hand side, and then you will click Enter Site Inspection Information. So as a site inspector, you will begin to develop your damage description and dimension, and your DDDs are created for each damage inventory line item. You're going to, of course, start at the Site Inspection tab, so this tab right here. And to enter your general facility information, you're going to click on Edit General Facility Info. Drop-downs and text boxes will open for your facility type, address or location description, and GPS type as you see on the slide. So here, again, we have that facility type, that address or location description, as well as the GPS type. So once you clicked on that Edit General Facility Information, our 3 initial drop-downs will populate, and you can hover your mouse over the question mark icon to get an explanation of what that topic is specifically asking for. So as you see here, we have that question mark icon next to facility type, address, location description, as well as GPS. When you hover over these in the Grants Manager system, it will give you further explanation of what each of these drop-downs or text boxes are specifically asking for. We want to put in our facility type. So this is based on a category E, building. So our facility type, when we use this drop-down, we then have building, building contents only, vehicle or equipment only. So we would go ahead and click on building. Moving forward, once you have picked the facility type, some additional drop-downs and text boxes will populate. For instance, facility type, we chose building, so we now have a drop-down underneath facility type that states building type. Here we would identify what the building type is. So as you see, when we select a building type, a drop-down populates, and we have several options here. These options include everything from barracks, city hall, courthouse, community center, fire station, etc. Our example, the building type is going to be a city hall. So I've clicked on city hall, and that will then populate in my building type section. Moving forward, so for instance, this text box below our building type is facility. Facility is asking you what the use or purpose of that building is. So to continue with our example of City Hall, our facility is offices and storage, which is identified by the applicant during our site inspection. Moving forward, we have our facility description. Within our general facility information is our facility description. So the definition of facility description is the description of the facility by stating its general dimensions and or its size, capacity, and function of its pre-disaster configuration. So this is important to note again. The facility description is the pre-disaster design, size, function, capacity, and dimensions. So what it looked like prior to the event. So the facility description is so important. We're going to take a moment to review this more in depth. So some objectives for our facility description include documenting the facility description on the site inspection report, documenting the facility description in Grants Manager, as well as viewing examples of good facility descriptions. During the site inspection, prior to getting any damages, the site inspector should ask the applicant to provide a description of the facility. This is generally located on page 2 of the site inspection report. And again, that facility description, as also listed on the site inspection report, encompasses that pre-disaster design, function, capacity, dimensions, and footprint. So the site inspector can work with the applicant to get the overall footprint and dimensions while in the field, and no damages are mentioned in this section. You simply try to understand what that facility design is and how or what it was used for and what it looked like prior to the event or incident. So when it comes to Grants Manager input, the facility description will be documented within the General Facility Information section. This is the first section that needs to be filled out in Grants Manager prior to getting to input your damage components. The information documented on the site inspection report should be recorded on the DDD in Grants Manager. Facility description should clearly define the pre-disaster design, function, capacity, and dimensions. So if we are referring to our City Hall example, the facility description could read, City Hall is a single-story office building with storage space, building on grade, no basement, made of brick with asphalt shingle roof and 9/12 pitch, approximately 60 feet long by 12 feet wide. So this is a good facility description. We now know the dimensions of the building, right? We have it's approximately 60 feet long by 12 feet wide. We have the function of the building, which is offices and storage space. And we know the design. It's a single story with no basement. And keep in mind here, I want to provide a note or a tip. So as you see on our visual here, we have facility and then we have facility description. So as a site inspector, just make note that you will always identify your facility description underneath your facility. So sometimes site inspectors may get confused and place a facility description within the facility section other than utilizing that facility description section. So just make note that these are two different components to understand that overall facility information. So utilizing facility to just identify, like maybe this is clearly Junction City Hall, or maybe it's, Junction City Courthouse. Just identifying or naming that building is sufficient within the facility section, and then breaking down and providing more in-depth detail in that facility description section is where we want that. So our next example of facility description states, facility includes 2 gravel roads, County Road number 13 and County Road number 513. Roads are 2-lane that vary in width from 20 to 24 feet wide and has a 3-to-1 side slope. Roads are designed with a 3-inch gravel surface. So this is a good facility description. Again, we've identified what it is. The dimensions of the roads being 20 to 24 feet wide. The design, 3-inch gravel surface and a 3-to-1 side slope. And we have specific road names identified. We have County Road 13 and we have County Road 513. Moving forward, our next example here just states historic passenger railroad for facility description. Our facility is Conway Scenic Railroad. So the Conway Scenic Railroad is actually a heritage railroad in North Conway, New Hampshire, and the railroad operated over 2 historic railway routes. A line from North Conway to Conway that was formerly part of the Conway branch, and the other line from North Conway through Crawford Notch to Fabian that was once part of the Mountain Division in the Maine Central Railroad. So the station complex has been listed on the National Historic Register in 1979. So with that information, what could be included to make this a better facility description, a more descriptive facility description, right? Other than just historic passenger railroad, maybe placing that it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places since 1979 would be good information. Maybe understanding where that railroad went, like the route. So we did have some route information I just babbled off there. That could be more beneficial to understand maybe where we are location-wise, right? So we want to be a little bit more descriptive than this example. So we're going to move on. We have one more example here. So again, our facility description is identifying that pre-disaster design function, capacity, and dimensions. So for example 1 here on the slide, our facility description states protective berm surrounding pump station. Could the facility be updated to state pump station, and then the facility description maybe state Stanford wastewater treatment plant, protective berm surrounding pump station? Could dimensions be identified in here? And what is the pump station's capacity? That could be useful information as well. So keep that in mind when developing your facility description. In addition, we have our number 2 here, our second example. We have a roadway, no culverts. The facility is a group of gravel roads. So that being said, our facility description is roads maintained by county with 3/4 inch base gravel on surface. So does that have some valuable information, right? So we do have that it's been maintained by the county, so that's good. And we also have information that it's generally a 3/4 inch gravel surface, right? So that's also good information. But what is missing? What could make this facility description better? Maybe providing the county name, dimensions of the width of road, such as varies from 20 to 24 feet wide, or something of the sort. Maybe identifying the road name, or if there are various roads, listing the multiple roads, listing them out. Keep in mind that this general facility information, this is like your summary of your overall damage components, right? We look at this to determine that big picture. So what are we going to be looking at big picture wise before we get into those damage components? So we just want to be as descriptive as possible when developing these facility descriptions. So we're going to return back to our inputting damages and our general facility information. So returning to our original example of the Category E building, which is City Hall, we now have year built. So under that facility description, the applicant stated on the day of the inspection that City Hall was built in 1985. This is an exact date. So in Grants Manager, we place 1985 in the year built text box, and then use the drop-down to identify exact. So now we have address location description. So which if you hover over the question mark again next to the section, you will get further explanation of what that text box is looking for. So it states enter a physical address or provide the location in relation to nearby major roads or landmarks. So in this case, with it being City Hall, our physical address is 730 Main Street, Junction City, Texas 76849. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into Grants Manager. And then in addition to our physical address or location, we also have a GPS type. So when you click on the drop-down for GPS type, you get 3 options. You get single, start and end, and NA, which you as a site inspector should always have a GPS, or you can find the GPS based on the physical address. So you should never have to use NA unless literally a GPS is not applicable, which is rare when it comes to identifying locations for site inspectors. So in our case with City Hall, this is a single GPS. So I selected single in the drop-down, and then a text box populates with the latitude and longitude for me to input my GPS. So as you see here in this other visual, we have entered our latitude, our longitude, after we have selected our GPS type. Okay, so moving forward, lastly, in our general facility information for Category E building, we have number of stories. So for our city hall, it is a one-story building, so we would input the number 1 into the text box. Then at this point in time, we would press the save button. But what would we as site inspectors do prior to pressing the save button? What is this nice laid out section to the right of our text boxes and our drop downs? We have that damage preview section, right? So this damage preview section populates the information we have placed in our text boxes and our drop downs. And it lines it all up for us to take a preview or a review to make sure that it makes sense, it is understandable, and it is complete and accurate. So once you preview your general facility information, it looks good, you got all the information in there, it's understandable, then you can go ahead and press save. So once you have pressed saved, you will then be brought back to the same page that you originally were at when you clicked enter site inspection information. So once you have completed your general facility information, Grants Manager will then ask you to edit your general damage information. So you're going to go ahead and click on Edit General Damage Info to the right of the screen, and a text box will populate for you to begin inputting your date damage as well as the cause of damage. So as you see here, first we select whether the date damage type is a single or a start and end. So this is referencing whether the damage occurred in one single day from the incident or if over several days during the incident period that damage occurred at this particular facility. So as you see in the visual, the date damage type I chose for our City Hall is single, and once the type is selected, in the dropdown, an additional box populates, specifically asking for a date. So for our City Hall, the date damage is March 1st, 2020. So I would go ahead and either utilize the calendar import here to find that date, or you can physically type it in here in your text box and it should populate. Moving on from our date damage type, we also have describe our cause of damage. So as mentioned throughout this presentation, if you hover your mouse over that question mark icon, it will state what it is asking for in that particular text box. So for describe cause of damage, it is asking you to list all applicable causes of damage to the facility. So for our City Hall, the cause of damage is Room 1 sustained damage from sewer backup that remained in the room for 2 days at a depth of 12 inches. Room 2 sustained minor damage from wind-driven rain entering near the northeast corner of the room. So as you see here, not only is this very descriptive, but we're breaking it out per room as each room encountered different damages. So next steps. So we've identified or we filled in our general facility information and our general damage information. And Grants Manager will now allow you to add your damage components. So keep in mind, until you complete that general facility information and general damage information, Grants Manager will not populate that add component button for you to start adding your components. So we've completed those sections. We're ready to add our components. So you're going to click the green Add Component button for each of the damage components listed on the site inspection report. Keep in mind, when it comes to category E, because it's not only building but also vehicle or equipment, you want to make sure that you are adding your building damages to building damage and not to vehicle and equipment damage unless you do have vehicle and equipment damage to document. So just keep that in mind, that there are more than one area, but we want to input your damages in the appropriate place. After you click on the Add Component, a text box will populate for you to input your damage component. Each component will be entered individually, first select the component dropdown. Since our damage we initially selected from the work order is category E, building, the component dropdown options will be specifically geared toward that category of work. So you see in the visual, category E, building, our options are only contents, building exterior, an exterior site, and building interior, as we are talking particularly about a building. So we are going to choose building interior as we're talking about interior damages to two separate rooms. So once you identify the component, you will continue to utilize the drop-downs in the text box to input each damage component. So next we have a location grouping text box. This is not a required field to fill out in order to move on, but it is a very beneficial feature for buildings with several rooms or sections that have several damage components per room or section. So this feature is also very useful when site inspectors have multiple roadways. So since we have City Hall with more than one damage in two different rooms, I'm going to use the location grouping text box to separate out my room 1 and room 2. As you see, I check mark the box and then I type in room 1. I then must identify the component I'm inputting. So the first damage component for room 1 is going to be commercial grade office carpet. And this is a standard 12-foot roll carpet. Again, you want to be as detailed as possible when providing component descriptions. So we will be discussing this later on, but the same thing with ceiling tiles. When it comes to component descriptions, different damages can have different material types, different dimensions. So although we will be capturing dimensions further down, as you see in our visual under dimension type, sometimes it is sufficient to put a standard dimension in our component description, because maybe the standard 12-foot roll is not the dimensions that were physically damaged, right? Or if we're talking about ceiling tiles, maybe we have the ceiling tiles are 2 feet by 2 feet, but the amount that is damaged, the area that was damaged was 10 feet by 4 feet. So our 10 feet by 4 feet, what was physically damaged, would come down here in our dimension type, but that still doesn't tell us what type or that component description, what it is, right? We want to identify what that component is, because we want to cost them out for 12 feet by 12 feet ceiling tiles, not 4 feet by 4 feet or 4 feet by 2 feet, whatever the case may be. We want to cost them out for the appropriate component. All right, so moving down the screen, we have provided a component description. So next is our make, model, and type. Again, this is also not a required field as it does not have an asterisk next to it. And it's generally used when a damage component has a make, model, or type. This can be a vehicle or a piece of equipment, such as a computer, a printer, a scanner. So don't force this topic if you do not have a make, model, or type. You just move on because there's nothing there to input. So after make, model, type, we have describe the damage and cause. So for room 1, our damage is sewer backup, flooded carpet, and destroyed it. So moving into our dimension type, you want to utilize the dropdown to select the dimension type related to your damage component. For example, we had commercial grade office carpet. We are going to use length by width. As you see in the visual on our screen, once you select the dimension type from that dropdown, additional boxes will populate underneath the dimension type to reflect the type of dimensions. So we know we have length and width listed below. So our text box as well as our dropdowns. So for length, we'll input 22 into the text box, and this is 22 feet. So we then will use the dropdown next to length and select foot. This is our unit of measurement for that dimension, right? Then we move to width, where we input the number 12 into the text box and then utilize the dropdown to select our unit of measurement, which is again foot. Our units of measurements here also have inches, acres. I mean, there's plenty of other options. Generally speaking, we would use foot as our measurements, and even if you have inches, you as a site inspector can convert that to feet, or you can utilize the drop down in inches, whatever disaster guidance is directing you, or your site inspector, crew lead, task force lead, whatever the preference. Okay, so we have identified our dimension type. Now we're moving on to our quantity type. Again, we're going to utilize the drop down. We're going to select our quantity type for the carpet. This would be area. See, in our quantity type, we have various options to choose from. But when determining square footage, we are talking about area. So the definition of area is the measurement of a surface. So as you see on the slide, we have selected area, and then we have to input the actual quantity. So you see next to the text box for quantity, there is again another drop down. This drop down will reflect options for area. So options for area would include square footage, square mileage, square yards, things like that. So we're going to select square foot from the drop down, and then you can click on this little calculator in order to populate your quantity based on your dimensions. This is a nice feature. However, keep in mind as a site inspector, you should always double check your work. So yes, this is a computer system. You think that it would have everything correct, but let's not lose sight of validating and peer reviewing and making sure that it is actually correct. So double check your work. And to calculate square footage, we take 22, we multiply it by 12, as those are our room measurements, and we get 264 square feet. So lastly, we have our percentage of work complete. So this is again a drop-down function and gives you options from 0 to 100. Keep in mind, some damage components can be different percentage of work complete compared to others, so make sure you reference your site inspection report to input your correct percentage of work complete per damage component you are inputting. So finally, you have inputted all the information into the text boxes and the drop downs. You want to do what before you press add? We want to look at that damage preview, right? This damage preview is important. It gives you a second to read through your damage component, how it's laid out, make sure that it's understandable, it's accurate, it's complete before you press that add button. So here, as you see, based on the information we inputted, we have building interior. It's 264 square feet of commercial grade office carpet, which is a standard 12-foot roll. 22 feet long by 12 feet wide. Cause of damage, sewer backup flooded the carpet and destroyed it. It is 0% complete. So I'm going to go ahead and press add. So at this point in time, I am going to transition to our grants manager demo, and I'm going to input our component number 2. I'm going to show you guys how to do that in more of a live version than in our slide deck here. So I've signed into Grants Manager, I'm at my dashboard, and I want to open my work order to input some damage components. So I'm going to go up to my bell, my incomplete tasks here. I'm going to click on my bell, and my task will populate. I have one task here, and my work order is assigned, so I'm going to review it. And then from review, I'm going to scroll down to my damages to be inspected. I'm going to drop down this option box here. Again, I have 14 damages, so I'm just going to extend that out so I can see all of them. And I am looking for damage E2 or DI number 995946. So from here, I'm going to click Options and Site Inspection Information. So once I click Site Inspection Information, it brings me to inputting my DDD. As you see here, I'm in our Site Inspection tab. I have my general facility information already complete. It's a building, city hall, offices and storage. I have my good descriptive facility description, year built, physical address, GPS, number of stories, and then my general damage information, as well as my single component that we just inputted, our commercial grade office carpet. So keeping that in mind, you can also go to the DDD preview tab. As we've been discussing, previewing, you can see how all this information is depicted, is inputted, and is organized and nice. So we see that we have our building damage and we have room 1. So using that location grouping feature, I have now divided my components from room 1, and when I go to input my second component for room 2, you will see how that breaks out as well. So I'm going to go back to site inspection tab. I'm going to scroll down to my building damage, and I'm going to add component. So from here, we get our component pop-up box. And my component is going to be building interior. My location grouping is going to be room 2. My component description is going to be 2 foot by 2 foot acoustical ceiling tiles, right? Because remember earlier, we want to be as descriptive as possible when it comes to the component description as well. Acoustic ceiling tiles come in multiple different sizes. So we want to identify what size we are looking at for that specific damage component. We're going to then go ahead and go to our describe damage and cause, because we don't have a make, model, or type. And this is going to be damage due to water intrusion from wind-driven rain caused water damage to ceiling tiles. If I click outside of that box, you now see my damage preview has populated. So as I'm inputting information, I'm seeing my damage preview populate. So I can move some things around if I feel necessary, but as of right now, I have building interior of 2 foot by 2 foot acoustical ceiling tiles, damage due water. See, I don't like that, so damage due to, and then it will populate and I can maneuver some terminology if need be to make it as understandable, clear, concise, and complete as possible. As we continue down the page here, my damage dimension or my dimension type is going to be length by width. So my length of damage, I measured, it was 10 feet in length. So I put 10 and then I select foot from the drop down. And my width is going to be 4 feet. So again, I input the number 4 and I select my unit of measurement, which is foot. My quantity type is going to be area. We're talking about ceiling tiles, so this could be considered measurement of a surface. Remember the definition of area. You could also put each if necessary, if you've actually counted out each particular damaged ceiling tile. You could do it that way as well, but for the sake of my example, we're going to use area. And so then my quantity, if I utilize the drop down, again, we're determining square foot. So I'm going to click on square foot, and then I can click the calculator button, which then determines my quantity measurement. So again, 10 times 4, that's how we determine square footage. 10 times 4 is 40. I can double check that. In addition, percentage of work complete, we're going to state 0 for the sake of this example. I'm going to return to my damage preview and I'm going to read through this. So I have building interior, 40 square feet of 2 foot by 2 foot acoustical ceiling tiles, 10 feet long by 4 feet wide, damage due to water intrusion from wind-driven rain caused water damage to ceiling tiles, and it is 0% complete. I like the sound of that. Maybe I don't. Maybe I maneuver some of these text boxes however you prefer, but utilize this preview section prior to pressing add. So I think it looks good. We're going to click add. And then I'm going to go straight to my DDD preview. So we're going to show you how our location grouping has now broken out our 2 separate rooms. And when I go to add additional damage components, if it falls under room 1, then I'll use the drop-down room 1, and they'll just go ahead and start piling underneath each other as bullets. Whatever components go to room 2, again, they will fall under room 2 when I utilize that location grouping section. One more little tip trick here, best practice. So let's say you have a room that also has a bathroom in it. So you have damage components in room 2, but there's also damage components in room 2's bathroom. One thing that you can do, I'm going to go to options, I'm going to edit this. In my location grouping section, I want to make a subcategory. So I'm talking about room 2, but I'm talking about room 2's bathroom and no longer just room 2. So in the location grouping, I identify room 2, and then I put //, 2 forward slashes, and then I'm going to put bathroom. So we're going to come down here and we're going to press save, and you see it has now changed in my location grouping. I'm going to go back to our DDD preview, and you see how now I have a subcategory underneath my first category here. So as you see, room 2 has now divided into room 2 bathroom. So you can use those forward slashes to divide up other areas or sections just like you could with the original location grouping, but you can even go more in depth, right? So keep that in mind as a little tip, trick, best practice, especially when you have large facilities and when you have 100 to 1,000 components and you want them to be as organized and well laid out as possible in this DDD, right? Remember, this is the foundation of our projects. We want this to be easily followed. We want all of our supporting documentation to continue to support this DDD. So just keep that in mind. They're all little pieces to the entire puzzle here. I do have a few slides that we're going to finish with here. Our first one being the DHS Office of Inspector General hotline. We hope that nobody has to use this, but in case you do, this is to report corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and misconduct to the Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General. We have a phone number here of 1-800-323-8603, as well as a mailing address if you would prefer to send something in via mail. You can address it to DHS Office of Inspector General /mail stop 0305. Attention, hotline 245 Murray Lane Southwest, Washington, D.C. 20528. In addition, we have our procurement guidance, or our PDAT. So to review the FEMA Procurement Disaster Assistance Team website for procurement supplemental documentation, you can visit www.fema.gov/grants/procurement, and FEMA's procurement guidance for recipients and subrecipients falls under 2 CFR Part 200. Uniform rules provided additional details regarding our federal procurement and contracting requirements. And last but not least, we have our Grants Manager Grants Portal hotline. So if you need any support, technical assistance within Grants Manager, you can go ahead and call us at 866-337-8448. Our hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. And for those of you who may be in Puerto Rico, we also have Puerto Rico hotline hours of operation are 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And if you do not get a hold of us within our operational hours or you don't feel like calling, you can always email us at FEMA-recovery-PA-grants@fema.dhs.gov. This concludes our webinar today on inputting damages and facility description. And I just want to thank all of you for joining us. And I hope you all took something away from today's webinar.